Hello and welcome to Atheists Talk. My name is James Zimmerman. I'm going to be your host for today's program. Today we're going to be talking about the Satanic Temple. We have a couple of their members with us today. We've actually had John Reisner here with us before, so this is kind of a sequel, but we're hoping to delve more into current events, things that have happened since the last time he appeared on the show. So welcome again, John.
Thanks for having me.
John is let me get this right, he is the chapter head of the Satanic Temple here in Minneapolis.
Correct.
And then also with us we have Corin Walsh. Welcome, Corin.
Thank you.
She is a chapter media liaison and member of the advisory board.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes,
okay.
you did.
I had to read it because it was a long thing. So, okay, so welcome you guys. So, like I said, we had you on before, John, but maybe just to, rehash a little bit, we can talk a little bit about the history of the Satanic Temple, especially in America here.
The Satanic Temple started around 2013, and that was largely a response to Governor Scott's attempt to introduce prayer in public school. So applying the same tactics that fundamentalist Christians did, some of our founding members went to a rally and held up placards comically alluding to the fact that now the worship of Satan would be allowed in public school.
Oh, yeah.
And that was met with predictable results, but the public reception to that particular action seemed to be substantial enough to warrant having some conversations regarding maybe starting an organization that was devoted to similar tactics and utilizing the metaphor of Lucifer as the eternal rebel, or acting in defiance of arbitrary authority. So that snowballed and became something that sometimes I wonder if even the founders had anticipated. And from there it spread to Detroit, and that was sort of their first chapter. And from Detroit, we summarily planted our flag all over the rest of the country. So.
And the world.
And the world. And we do have chapters in other parts of the world, too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can mention stuff outside the United States. What other countries?
Italy. We're talking about establishing one in the UK. The Netherlands has expressed some interest. Canada, South America.
South America.
So quite a few secular communities have found our message to be to their liking. So.
Oh, okay. And then in the United States, you mentioned several other states. Like, is there a presence in every state, or?
Not in every state yet, but I think the chapters get enough attention on their own merit that they have a tendency to overlap. So if you're in a state where there isn't a chapter, you're certainly close enough that you could involve yourself with, at some level, with a neighboring chapter.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, there's some states with not a lot of people, period.
So, yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so pretty recent, actually. 2013.
It hasn't been very long.
Yeah. So what about here in Minnesota? Let's talk about the establishment here.
I started the process about 2 years ago. I was friends with a gentleman who was involved with the sort of core membership in New York, and he had hinted that this would be something I'd possibly be interested in. He was aware of my proclivities, I think. So, and I didn't really know a great deal about the Satanic Temple at the time. I looked on their website and discovered, to my delight, that it was something that I had felt for a long time. I'd just never been able to really articulate, and certainly hadn't found in other left-hand path traditions or other satanic organizations. So that began the interview process and the vetting me as a candidate to make sure I wasn't a crazy person and potential Jim Jones or anything. And so I put out a Craigslist ad, I believe, announcing my presence. I had two friends that I happened to discover quite by accident who were already members of the Satanic Temple on the national level. So the three of us held a meeting, and then we had, I think, 2 or 3 people show up to our first public meeting, which was a surprise. I didn't think there'd be anyone, but and now we've grown to, how many members do you think we have?
Oh gosh, probably around 50.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think we have about 50 active members. So
okay.
It's just kind of grown under its own steam, so it's been great.
So I mentioned Minnesota, but I assume that's all the metro area.
It's primarily. I mean, certainly we have interested parties from all corners of Minnesota, and when they're unable to interact with us, on a person-to-person basis, we do our best to direct them to resources in their community where they could do similar things, and with respect to secular activism and that sort of thing.
So you mentioned other organizations that there might be some overlap with, and I know before the show began we were talking a little bit about how there might be some other groups that have similar sounding names that people might mix up. Why don't
Yes.
we itemize those and explain the differences?
Well, I think.
Or why don't you do it, because I don't know.
I think the biggest, the most well-known group that we're mistaken for is the Church of Satan. That was founded in 1966 by Anton LaVey. And certainly there are members, within the Satanic Temple who, have a great deal of respect for what he did in terms of, bringing Satanism to the public eye. The Satanic Temple differs very greatly in that we reject the doctrine of lex talionis, or tooth and claw, might is right, that sort of thing. That sort of thinking has a tendency to ignore what we know now. One of our 7 tenets is our beliefs must conform to our best scientific understanding of the world. So the concept of might making right discounts things like reciprocal altruism and game theory and these kinds of things that a healthy society depends on to thrive and advance. So we dismiss that notion of being some sort of ubermensch or some sort of mighty satanic superhero altogether. We also dismiss the notion of the efficacy of ritual magic. The Satanic Temple is non-supernaturalist. So the Church of Satan sort of talks out of both sides of its mouth, and certain passages in the Satanic Bible will reference ritual magic, and certain passages will discount its importance or disregard it altogether. We've taken a pretty strong stance on saying that we're non-theistic and non-supernaturalist, so we don't practice ritual magic of any kind.
So are there groups that identify under the, I guess for lack of a better word, Satanist umbrella that do practices of the occult, or they're sort of witchcraft that are around?
I mean, I'm sure there are people, if you ask 100 Satanists what it means to be satanic, you'll get 100 different answers. I think most members of the Satanic Temple are, we identify as a religious organization, but, primarily we're politically aware secularists. So I think that has a tendency to weed out the vast majority of people who might be interested in any occult concepts.
Okay, sure, yeah.
In the broader satanic community, I'm sure there are countless thousands of people that are practicing some sort of ritual or another, which is fine. We're trying to establish religious liberty for all concerned parties. It's just not something we care to engage in or give any credence to.
Okay. So we talked about the supernatural. So is there a conflict between having the word Satan in the name of the organization and then saying that we reject the supernatural?
No, we've never seen any conflict there. I mean, our Satan is a literary one. Our Lucifer is the romantic poets. So Shelley and Keats and these types of the sort of the Lord Byron, sort of the heroic anti-hero. So, in fact, on our suggested reading list is The Revolt of the Angels by Anatole France. And the gist of that narrative is that it's just as disgusting to have to lead someone as it is to be led. So our metaphor that we employ is more of an egalitarian Lucifer, in the truest sense of being a light bringer, so dispelling myth and this sort of thing. And you can apply the name really historically across the board. You could call it Prometheus, you could call it Loki, you could call it any number of fictional beings. But it's certainly a very bright rubber stamp on the cultural document that's easily identifiable for people.
Sure.
And
yeah.
they can begin the discourse with us from there.
I think when most people hear the word Satan or satanic, they imagine the character from the Bible.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, historically, biblically, Satan was just an adversary. It wasn't, so we're certainly not promulgating evil.
Yeah.
We're just offering a dissenting opinion. We're acting in an adversarial capacity to what we perceive to be, damaging litigation and damaging lawmaking and damaging behaviors by the religious right.
So I have a really vague bullet point here that just says dispel stereotypes or rumors. So are there any others that either of you have that you want to bring up?
We are parents and teachers, and business owners and lawyers, just like everybody else. We see maybe a different way of approaching our life in this sense. I know for me, admitting that I am a Satanist gave me a strength that I just couldn't find in any other way. It's held me up. It's held me up in a way that I don't have to follow any other dogma other than what I believe in and what I know is my core values. And that said too, we have done some amazing humanitarian work. We had a sock drive this winter where we collected over almost 1,200 pairs of socks.
Oh, wow.
For Souls for Souls.
These were pairs of socks?
Okay, wow. Yeah, 1,177 pairs of socks.
Not to mention the cash donations and other sorts of aid that went to Souls for Souls.
Yeah, because I'm hard-pressed a lot to find a pair of socks in my own drawer. So I would be more likely to give a cash donation than actually have a pair of socks.
Sure.
Well, these were new socks.
Oh, okay,
these were people who went out and bought new socks and donated them to us so that we could get them to people in need. So, we care about our community, and I think the bake sale that we recently had for me showed me what a strong and large community, satanic community, and a satanic supporting community that we have in the Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota. We had people come from Duluth and from St. Cloud to support us in what is our big fundraiser.
Yeah, food can be a powerful motivator.
Food, cookies, yeah.
So any other stereotypes or things that people wrongly assume, you think?
I think really the blanket assumption is that we're somehow bent on malevolence and destruction and all these sorts of things. You know, the Hollywood tropes of sulfur and brimstone and capes and horns and all these sorts of things, those linger, despite our best efforts.
And we keep a pair of horns around just in case we need one.
On an emergency basis.
That makes sense.
But we ultimately we're primarily interested in advancing, the notion and empowering people that they can discover their own true self and act on that without fear of recrimination, and that trying to guarantee that the wall between church and state remains intact. We oppose the legislation of morality, in every sense of the word. So we're really just secular humanists, of course, who have accepted our status as outsiders and have adopted a certain set of principles that are make the right people angry, I think.
That sounds good, yeah. I know that, so I know Minnesota Atheists has this issue too, where a lot of energy gets spent on just dispelling incorrect assumptions. And I was actually in the city of Salem, Massachusetts last summer, which, as you probably know, has a large witchcraft community, and it's even a tourist, attraction because of that. So at one museum, I was surprised by, as you walk through the museum, it's got to be more than half of it is just, here's what it's not. And there's even like a sheet of paper you could take that say, here's what it currently doesn't mean, and here's our big thanks Hollywood for making all these stereotypes that people assume that if you're a witch you automatically get like this pointy black hat or something. So I'm just saying that because there must be a parallel with unfortunate maybe amount of calories have to be burned just dispelling rumors in order to
we
even
don't
get
all
people
wear black
to
satin robes.
Sure.
And,
I think the irony I think is that most of the myths need to be dispelled to other Satanists. I think religious people have a tendency just to dismiss us outright. They don't even want to hear what we have to say, or they're not interested in listening to us try to validate ourselves. And we're not interested in validating ourselves to them in any case, so it works out pretty well for everybody. But when people from other satanic traditions come to us, it's like any other religious group, so to speak. They have a surety of purpose. They're they're the right type of Satanist.
Oh yeah, sure.
So we have to assure them that there are no orgies and blood drinking and anything else that's commonly associated with Hollywood Satanism.
Yeah.
So I think, but we've tried to step away from that a bit. The information is available. Ignorance is intentional in this day and age. So if you don't care to do your background research and use Google before coming to a Satanic Temple meeting, it's no one's fault but your own.
Right.
And our meetings are really pretty tame.
Oh.
They're just eating burgers and drinking beer. And,
Oh, okay.
there's a shocking lack of ribaldry.
Okay, so that's the negative, but I know you touched already on some of the positive about the church-state separation, but do you want to talk about let's talk about the main tactics and current events that the Satanic Temple's been involved with.
Well, our main tactic, of course, is litigation. I think that's always been our cornerstone of anything that we try to do. Really, one of our key things is just to apply the same tactics that fundamentalist Christianity, for instance, tries to establish. Prayer in school and similar topics. That seems to be fine and dandy for most of the American population. When we demand equal representation, then suddenly the party's over and no one wants to have that conversation anymore. So just by asking for permission to do some things that certain religious groups have always been granted, that in itself can be enough to at least start a conversation or move the dialogue forward. As far as ongoing campaigns and things like that, the Baphomet monument has now been laid to rest, so thankfully or at least for now, it's been tabled. We did have our chapter in Arizona offer to do a satanic invocation prior to a city council meeting, and that was, we were prepared to file suit. An objection to it would have been unconstitutional. So they allowed it, and at the last minute had an emergency session of the city council and determined that only chaplains of the city fire department or police department would be allowed to offer the invocation or the opening prayer. So a countersuit was planned, and it's openly discriminatory. So that's ongoing. I can't say much more about that, pending an outcome to the situation. But it's caused quite a debacle, and it really does highlight, I think, the hypocrisy of the religious right across the country. They're not asking for religious openness or free expression. They're asking for religious privilege.
Yeah.
So that's again, that's where we come in. When we ask for equal protection under the law, it forces their hand to show that they're asking for actually preferential treatment.
So we don't have to talk about the Arizona one in particular since it's pending, but in general, what would you say is a preferred outcome, that if a city council or a county is seeking religious privilege, would you rather that they cave and say, okay, the Satanic Temple gets equal time, or would you rather that they say, nope, forget you guys, and now this is going to court?
I think it's always been the intention of the Satanic Temple to remove religious practice of any kind from the public sphere. I personally never cared whether or not the Baphomet monument was erected in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
I don't care whether or not the invocation is performed in Arizona. I personally, and I think I speak for probably 99% of the members of the Satanic Temple, would like to see all displays of religious affiliation removed entirely from the public eye. So if it requires litigation to get there, then so be it. It's either everyone gets a seat at the table or no one does.
So do you think some of these government officials are just ignorant of the possible outcomes or the ramifications? I'm keeping in mind that just like 2 minutes ago you said there's no excuse for ignorance here in the 21st century, but some just might
Sure.
be. Or do you think that they're purposely knowing that they're going to be leaving out members of the Satanic Temple, or possibly maybe they're thinking of it, that this is going to exclude Muslims, and that's fine with them because they want their brand of Christianity to move forward?
I think it's a little from column A and a little from column B.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
I think, oftentimes, the city officials aren't prepared for us to stake a claim. And when they are prepared, I think they're full of enough hubris that they assume that their constituency will back them and perpetuate, the stereotypes that follow us. And they'll stand on moral high ground to deny us a voice and summarily deny everyone else a voice that follows us. So, really either one of those tactics employed by them is a benefit to us, because we certainly don't do anything, outside of the confines of the law. So any effort to combat us just, shows their open hypocrisy and their willingness to go above the law to achieve their theocratic end.
And I suppose litigation at a city and county level, they have a finite amount of funds that they're culling from.
Precisely.
Okay, even the federal government does, but just a county in the middle of New Mexico, they can only have so much in their pot that they can spend on legal fees, right? So
right.
It's got to be difficult to fight that in every case if they want to.
Occasionally, it is a war of attrition. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to get back specifically to Minnesota. I know we were just talking about Arizona, and there's you said some other things kind of vaguely around the country, but is there anything in Minnesota that's currently pending or issues that you've seen that you would like to get involved with?
Corin, you want to touch on the district a little bit, maybe?
The district.
The Cliff's Notes? Or we could save that.
We might want to save that, yeah.
We're very concerned with LGBT rights.
Very, and the right to die.
And right to die legislation is another big one. Obviously, there's parts of that we can't openly discuss pending outcomes to some of these things, but there are some situations I think that are crying out for the attention of the Satanic Temple, insofar as we concern ourselves with bodily autonomy and things like that. But rest assured, we're always trying to be worthy advocates and allies to the LGBT community. So there's some things going on there. We're going to be at Pride this year, speaking of that, so we got that coming up, and that's a great outreach opportunity. We do have a youth chapter. Again, that's something that's in sort of an odd state of flux because they're kids and it's difficult to wrangle them, but there's plenty to keep us busy in Minnesota here. It's just things that we're all working on as we speak. So I apologize for not being able to reveal more.
No, that's okay.
detail.
I was going to ask then, how do you find out about church-state separation violations? Are you just dependent on whistleblowers, or do you have a network that are constantly researching the minutes from city councils? Or
a little from column A, a little from column B. Certainly a lot of us have a vested interest in these topics, so more than one of us scour every conceivable media source we can to uncover things like that. And people from their communities will reach out to us, because we have a proven track record of bringing to light some of these situations.
So I guess I'm asking something that I think is pretty obvious, but maybe for the benefit of listeners, or maybe there's an angle that I'm missing here. Regarding the big umbrella of non-theists, what advantage do you think that the Satanic Temple has in using litigation or in fighting some of these grievances against freedom of speech over, say, a humanist organization or even maybe Minnesota Atheists?
I don't know that there's necessarily any particular advantage, other than the fact that by appealing to common decency as the Satanic Temple, any objection to that reveals just a bias on the part of the person who's objecting to it. We call for reason and justice and common sense, and practical common sense and justice is something that we often say.
And I think it's too, we make people a little uncomfortable, and just because you aren't familiar with a belief or a practice doesn't make it wrong. And sometimes you have to be a little uncomfortable to grow, and I think we're proving that just with our presence. We're stretching some old scars that have been in place for a very long time, just by being the Satanic Temple and by poking some of these long-standing belief systems. We're making people a little uncomfortable, but uncomfortable is what you have to do in order to grow and move forward. So.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I think we're brushing the dirt off the relic and showing people how ugly it was when it was made in the first place.
Yeah.
You know,
So we only have about 2 minutes left, but I wanted to give our viewers some options for if they want to learn more or even to get involved. So do you have any websites or books you guys want to recommend?
Yes, go to
The
Satanic Temple, Minneapolis. We'll be posting there our new member orientation classes where people can come and learn about the Satanic Temple, about what we do, about Satanism in history and Satanism moving forward and what it takes to become a member of our group. And we'll be posting the dates of those classes coming up there. Our Facebook page is also a place to hear about what we're doing and hear about.
And what's that link is?
That is
MSPTST, I believe, is in the URL. Also, the national organization can be reached at simply thesatanictemple.com, and they have links to relevant sites for people across the country.
Okay, so I know that we put the links on the screen too, and then as you already mentioned earlier, you know, there's search engines these days. So.
Yeah.
Okay, well, was there anything else that we missed? We just have like 1 minute left, but if there was anything else?
Not that I can think of. I do thank you, and on behalf of the Satanic Temple, we thank the Minnesota Atheists very much for being such good allies to us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. So thank you for coming on again and giving us an update since the last time you were here, and thank you, Corin, for your information as well.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Yes, you too. And thank you for watching our show or listening to our podcast. We are always looking for more information, so if you have other ideas that you would like to see presented on this show, then just let us know. You can write to us or email or call us at the information that you see on the screen. Actually, if you do so, we'll send you a copy of our newsletter so you can find out about our events and the things that we're doing in the community. Because if you're interested in us, we're interested in you. Thank you.